I believe the numbers were phony, so you know what I did? I fired her.
Right.
What does a bad leader do when they get bad news? Shoot the messenger.
The big downward revision is something of a puzzle. I don't think it was explained very well.
Well, Donald Trump, firing her isn't going to relieve the chaos that you've created with your ramshackle tariff regime.
We'll be announcing a new statistician sometime over the next 3-4 days. We had no confidence. I mean, the numbers were ridiculous, what she announced.
In the United States, the Bureau of Labor Statistics compiles and publishes data on the health of the U.S. economy. Now, this includes monthly reports on new hires by companies, and that was exactly what happened last Friday. The new jobs report for July was published, and the numbers were not in sync with how President Trump thinks the economy is doing.
We're seeing phenomenal numbers in terms of the business we do with other countries and the business we do within our own country. I mean, really phenomenal. And if you remember, just before the election, this woman came out with these phenomenal numbers on Biden's economy. Phenomenal numbers. And then right after the election, they announced that those numbers were wrong. And that's what they did the other day. So it's a scam, in my opinion.
Today, we got some of the worst labor numbers that we've gotten in a long time. But what does Donald Trump do? Instead of trying to fix the economy, he shoots the messenger. Shooting the messenger isn't going to make the jobs that we're losing in healthcare and clean energy because of your so-called big, beautiful bill come back. Donald Trump sometimes admires dictators. He admires them. Well, he sometimes acts just like them. It's classic Donald Trump. He ought to start governing like a leader, not like someone who imitates authoritarian leaders.
And for more, I'm joined now by Andrew Ackerman. He's a journalist with The Washington Post. He has been covering this story concerning the job numbers in the United States. Andrew, it's good to have you with us. Is this story, is it a case of shooting the messenger?
I think that's certainly the conclusion of the BLS commissioners, the previous BLS commissioners, both Democrats and Republicans. It's a little hard to. I mean, there's a bit of a disconnect between the president's rhetoric that you know the numbers were designed to hurt him specifically and were rigged in a way against him, and sort of the reality of how the numbers come together. That just doesn't comport. There's not really, the commissioner doesn't have any involvement, and you can see real concern from all of the recent predecessors who are at the BLS that this is going to undermine the integrity of their process.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you about the credibility of these numbers in just a moment, but Trump said that these jobs data were rigged to make him look bad. How likely is that? I mean, considering how the data are gathered and analyzed, could someone have an agenda when the numbers are published?
I mean, based on what I know about the numbers, it's really not a process that the BLS commissioner, the person running the agency, has real vision into until the very last moment, where they can't really adjust the data itself. They have a role in sort of editing the actual text of the report. I think the afternoon, or at least certainly the within the last couple of days before they're released publicly, there's a role for the BLS commissioner to be able to edit the text, but not the data under the system right now. It's a very technical and involved system that they have, but it is nonpartisan. There's no indication that if you're running this bureau, you can kind of skew the data or just not release the data because you don't like it, or delay the data.
President Trump says that this was not the first time that this has happened. He also claims the economic numbers were rigged to make former President Biden, look better ahead of the last election. Is there any truth to that?
So I think the president is kind of conflating a few things that do happen. I mean, these are called revisions, where there's monthly revisions where the numbers come out and then they'll be revised the following month. And then once a year, there's a separate benchmarking, or what's called a benchmark revision, where basically the BLS double checks their data against state unemployment records. That happens, like I said, annually. There's a preliminary figure that comes out in August, and that happened last August. A year ago, they revised down the jobs figures by about 800,000, 818, and this came out, right after Biden got out of the race. So I guess the argument from the president is that that was designed to hurt Kamala Harris by the Biden people, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense. There's certainly no evidence for that. I mean, the people who were at the in the White House at the time would certainly deny that. They wouldn't have had any say in, like, there's no evidence of a conspiracy, and that's just not how the BLS works.
Well, assuming that these latest job numbers are correct, I mean, what do they tell us about the health and the state of the U.S. economy under President Trump?
So they indicate that the labor market is cooling down significantly. The president has been out there talking about how the economy is doing fantastically, inflation's non-existent, and the labor market's on fire. And what we learned over basically 72 hours last week after the Fed met to hold interest rates again for the fifth consecutive meeting, because they're saying there's all this uncertainty. When what we learned is that actually the labor market cooled a lot more than initially thought in May and June, and that the July numbers weren't fantastic either. And at the same time, we also got new inflation readings that showed that inflation was running kind of hot as well for the past year, for the July to July period.
So let me ask you then about the credibility of these numbers. I mean, what implications does this firing have for the believability, the credibility of U.S. economic statistics moving forward? Because these numbers, they are really important, aren't they?
Yeah, the numbers are very important. I mean, I think, there was a JP Morgan note that came out yesterday from their economists that basically, there's this metaphor about a soft landing, and how the Fed's goal over the last year was to kind of bring down inflation steadily but without triggering a recession. And so to kind of use that soft landing metaphor, the instruments in the cockpit are just as important as the pilot in the seat, and making sure the pilot's not acting, basically not a political actor. And so their argument was, like, the numbers, the statistics, the process that creates the statistics, and ensuring that those are reliable and people have confidence in them, that's just as important as the pilot itself.
And what could all of this mean for the U.S. economy if the agencies that collect economic data, if they are politicized and called into question?
Yeah, I mean, it has all kinds of implications for the transparencies of these agencies. There's a lot of people who are concerned that the next BLS commissioner will inject themselves more into how they come up with the data, the process, that where they take sample projections, or they take bits of data that they get, and then they'll project a sort of national figures with those samples. And you could have a BLS commissioner who decides, to inject themselves into that process more than they are right now. And it also comes at a time when there's broader concerns about the integrity. There's already concerns about the BLS integrity because they've effectively been short. Their funding has held mostly steady for about 10 or 15 years, is my understanding. So, that's effectively, with inflation and everything, kind of a pay cut. They are clearly stretched thin for the inflation, the consumer prices, the consumer price index that they release every month.
Yeah.
The BLS has announced that they don't have enough people to go into all of these cities and to look at the prices and compare prices for specific figures. So they're using more estimates in their data. So that's already kind of a concern, that you basically end up with a much more politicized system that's where there's just less confidence. It's too early to say that that's where we're at, but there's clearly a lot of concern. I mean, you had Janet Yellen, who's not really a political firebrand, saying this is the type of stuff you see in a banana republic. She was quoted in the New York Times over the weekend saying that. So there's just really a lot of concern right now.
Yeah, like it or not, I have a feeling the next jobs report is going to be watched by a lot of people who normally would not be interested in it. Andrew Ackerman with the Washington Post. Andrew, we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me.